The app. It started with an innocent download. Haunted Legends, AR, read the title. The description promised immersive, augmented reality experiences that would bring urban legends to life in your very own home. Jane, a self-proclaimed horror fanatic, couldn't resist. The reviews were glowing, praising how eerily real the app felt. She downloaded it late one night, the glow of her phone the only light in her small apartment. The digital progress bar inched forward as shadows from the swaying trees outside her window danced across the walls. The app required her to scan her environment to map the space. Intrigued, Jane wandered through her apartment, pointing her phone into each corner as it instructed. The process took longer than expected, and she grew unnerved by how her camera seemed to linger on shadowy corners, as if searching for something, or someone. When the app finally confirmed the space was ready, the screen flickered. Then, nothing. No AR ghost popped up, no jump scare, just a static black screen. "Really?" she muttered, rolling her eyes. Frustrated, she tried to exit the app, but it wouldn't close. Her phone seemed frozen, and she noticed the battery draining unnaturally fast. The room around her seemed to grow darker, the familiar warmth of her apartment replaced by an inexplicable chill that gnawed at her spine. She glanced at her lamp, still on but dimmer now, as if the light were being swallowed by the shadows. Then the app spoke. A garbled, static-laden voice emanated from her phone, but the words were unmistakable. "I see you." Jane froze. Her breath caught in her throat as her gaze snapped back to the screen. The display now showed her living room, but not as it should be. The furniture shifted subtly, as though viewed through a warped lens. The walls seemed to breathe, and shadowy figures flitted just out of focus. Her hands trembled as she desperately tried to close the app, but her phone refused to respond. Without warning, the phone's camera switched to a front-facing view, but instead of her own reflection, she saw it. A grotesque version of herself stared back. Its skin was pale and waxy, its eyes sunken into hollow sockets, and its lips stretched into a malevolent grin. "Your life is now my playground," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo of her own. With a strangled cry, Jane hurled the phone across the room. It landed with a heavy thud but remained unbroken. Then it moved. The phone crawled. It dragged itself across the floor, inching toward her as if possessed by some unseen force. Jane scrambled to her feet, her back pressed against the wall as she watched in frozen horror. The app's voice returned, but now it came from everywhere. Her TV, her laptop, even her smart speaker. "It doesn't need your phone anymore." Her blood ran cold. The realization hit her like a freight train. The app wasn't haunting her phone. It had mapped her home, learned its every creak and shadow, and now it had escaped. Screens across her apartment flickered to life, each showing distorted images of her life. Her childhood memories, cherished moments with friends, private moments she thought were hers alone. All were now twisted, corrupted by an unseen force. A cacophony of whispers filled the air, their words indistinct but heavy with malice. The shadows in the room grew darker, deeper, coalescing into forms that reached for her. Jane bolted out the door, her heart hammering in her chest. The night air was cold and sharp, but it offered no comfort. She glanced back at her apartment and saw the glow of her screens through the window. They were still on, displaying the same twisted, malevolent images. But the horror didn't end there. As she stumbled down the street, streetlights flickered and dimmed as she passed. The feeling of being watched never left her, and the whispers seemed to follow her, carried on the wind. Desperate, she tried to tell her friends, the police, anyone who would listen. But the app left no trace on her phone. It was gone from the App Store as if it had never existed. No one believed her. In a fit of desperation, she destroyed every electronic device she owned, smashing screens and cutting wires. For a moment, she thought it might be over. But the shadows in her apartment didn't fade. They grew stronger. The whispers turned into mocking laughter that echoed through the halls. One night, as she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, she saw it again, the doppelganger. It grinned at her from the other side of the glass, its hollow eyes brimming with malice. "There's nowhere to run," it whispered. The lights went out. This time, they never came back on.